The tape is rolling.
The tape is rolling. All right, so I should probably get this show on the road. Thank you, everybody who is here tonight. Welcome to the May 2021 meeting of the Central Florida Astronomical Society. We are meeting appropriately enough, socially distanced as we can possibly be, I suppose. We were talking before the meeting. We're cautiously optimistic that we will be able to get together again soon, perhaps in a few months. Part of the situation, of course, is very fluid. I know we have members who feel very strongly one way or the other, and I'm not going to try to talk either side into seeing things the way the other side should see it. But I will say that, we meet at the planetarium and the college has its rules. And so sort of as a bare minimum, we can't exceed what the college will allow us to do. And of course, right now we still can't meet tentatively. In a few months, that may change, and masks may or may not be encouraged. We'll just kind of have to see how things are going. But this will not last forever, and I appreciate everyone's patience while we work through this. I'm very, very optimistic, and we were also talking before the meeting, and I've been speaking with some friends the other day about this too. Just some outdoor, outreach events would be really great. I know some people outreach isn't their thing. They want to go do observing with groups. We're going to do that too, of course. But outreach is also great fun. It's a great excuse to get together and to share our love for astronomy with the general public. And it's a great way to demystify the mysteries of outer space. So outreach is always great fun. So let's see, what are we doing tonight? Right now, I'm going to talk for a minute or two, announcements, and then our own Derek Demeter, who happens to be a planetarium director, might know a thing or two about giving programs, is going to talk about Central Florida nights, hopefully highlighting some things we can look at this summer when the weather allows us. And then we'll have our bevy of mini programs. Remember Astrophoto and Sketches, which always please send those in. Send them in to Derek and or me or both. We love to showcase what our members are working on. We've got a couple of good, very, very talented sketchers in the club, and a good number of talented astrophotographers as well. And I think it's great to show off that we're doing what we can when we can. I'll spend just a minute on my favorite topic, which is the moon. Bill Castro is going to give a talk about a cool little micro guide eyepiece doohickey. I thought I was the only one in the world that had one of these. So when I saw his presentation, I was very excited that he was going to talk about that. Eric Hoin is going to do 60 seconds on the sun. And then at the end, Frank Kane has been building an observatory. I'm going to tell on Frank. The original talk was something about Scopy McScopeface, which is the silly name of his telescope. But he's going to talk about his adventures building a backyard observatory. Frank, no, we may have a scheduled flop. Eric is going to be running late, so he should be here in plenty of time. But if not, we'll scooch Frank up to the front so that give Eric a little more time. And that's pretty much tonight's program. The normal slides coming through. New website is live if you haven't seen it yet. And of course, a friendly reminder that all our official communication is through Groups.io. If you haven't joined yet, please go do that. Of course, we're on Facebook as well. But the Groups.io is our, nobody's tracking you or selling you anything on Groups.io. Also, our publicity chair, Sharife, is always looking for astrophotos or events, anything that's going on that you can send her that she can promote for the club. That would be great. And our outreach chair, Lynn, is always looking for outreach things. Outreach is actually very easy. It's a very easy thing to do. You can do it by accident. I set up my telescope at the end of the driveway, had no intention of talking to anybody, and I had 20 neighbors bugging me. And at the end, I had a great time, and I think my neighbors did too. We were looking at some stuff, and when it was done, it was like, I think it was Lynn who said, "Hey, Richard, you did an outreach event, believe it or not." And that's really what that is. If you're doing something with other people and it's promoting astronomy and CFAS, that's an outreach event, and that counts. And we do keep track of that sort of thing. NASA is keeping score, so we do want to keep score if we have anything that we can bump into that. Events this month, it's summertime, so things are a little slow. As I was saying earlier, I'm hoping we'll get back to some outdoor, maybe do some outdoor things, maybe some daytime solar events before the summer is over. But Derek is going to give a very interesting presentation on the River of Heaven, Asian astronomy. And I will paste the Zoom link here into the chat window so you do not have to remember uppercase WN underscore W4P6H, blah, 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 blah. I'll paste that into the chat window for you. And with no further ado, I've taken up enough time. It's time to get to our main program. So Derek, when you say go, I will stop sharing my screen and you can take it away. And I'll also turn off
all right,
space here.
No problem. Yes, no worries. Hello, everybody. So thank you for coming out to tonight's meeting. Trisha, if you're there, I don't know if you want to introduce me or not. I think most of us know who I am at this point.
I had one plan. We were going to talk about your opera work.
Oh,
that's a great idea.
well, I kind of heard a little bit of that. So
can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah.
A phone commercial. Okay, so I had a short one prepared because I wanted to mention how you're a famous opera singer. So moving on. Everyone should know Derek Demeter. If you don't, well, this is Derek. He's pretty awesome. Get to know him. Derek has been around Central Florida for as long as I can remember. And I've known Derek for going on maybe 10 years now. So Derek has been planetarium director for quite some time at Seminole State College. And he has a degree from UCF. Looks like it's actually a dual degree, physics with an astronomy specialization. He also has a degree from Seminole State College. And Derek, who you might think is always in the planetarium, always doing astronomy, well, Derek does a lot more than that. Derek is an avid hiker, kayaker, scuba diver, photographer, obviously, astrophotographer, and he travels with his beautiful wife, Lisa, all around the world, fossil hunting, rock hounding, and attending theatrical performances. One little piece of information we might not know about Derek, and I just discovered this tonight, and that is that Derek used to sing in the Orlando Opera and has half a mind to return, maybe once COVID blows over, to opera singing. So hopefully we will be invited maybe to a performance. Looking forward to that. Also, I'm going to post a link. Derek, who's been on TV many times, Derek was on TV not too long ago for his woolly mammoth find. Him and his friend, he and his friend Henry discovered a woolly mammoth bone. So make sure to check out that video after the talk. Derek, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Trisha. Yes, actually, Trisha and I have gone back way back. And it's,
we met at the Neil deGrasse Tyson luncheon back in 2020 at the Harmony Dark Sky Festival, where we were doing the we were setting the world's record for the largest outdoor star party back in, I think, 2010, 2009. That was my cat. And we actually inducted Neil deGrasse Tyson into the Brevard Astronomical Society at the time, and that's where I met Derek. So
absolutely, and it's been awesome ever since. So thank you, Trisha. So you probably I'm sure some of you have seen me on the news lately. It's been kind of a wild ride. I was again recently, me and my friend Henry scuba dove the Peace River and found a mammoth humerus bone, basically the shoulder bone of a very large mammoth, Columbian mammoth. This would have been the largest elephant to have ever lived, probably as tall as 14 feet, weighing over 20,000 pounds. So you can only imagine what that is. So anyways, but I am here today to talk to you all about the night sky. Now, as Richard mentioned earlier, hopefully very, very soon, we'll be able to have you all back out to the planetarium, and we'll be able to do these night sky programs in the planetarium. Don't want to get too excited, but we are actually in the process of potentially upgrading our planetarium software to some very, very cool things. Again, I don't want to get too excited, but this is the future. So hopefully sometime soon, we'll be able to utilize some of this new technology that we'll have available to us for CFAS events, for CFAS programs and things like that. So keep our fingers crossed. I actually have a meeting with the foundation in a few weeks. And that's actually one of the things I'm going to be working on through the summer as far as getting that ready. So we'll keep from that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. I'm going to turn off my video and I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. We're going to take a look at what we can see in our night sky this time of year. So, of course, we're getting closer and closer and closer to the summer solstice, of course, the longest day of the year for us here in the Northern Hemisphere, shortest day if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. So I guess if COVID was not really a problem, we should all go down to South America or South Africa or Australia or New Zealand and we can do more astronomy down there because it's the Milky Way is really, really high and really, really beautiful, but it's also cooler and it gets dark earlier. But of course, unfortunately, here in Florida, we're entering kind of what we call our storm season. Skies get a little bit more murky because of the humidity. But there are those few rare moments where the sky does remain clear for us to see. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at some of the things that you can observe just kind of get more familiar with the night sky as we go on. So the first thing I want to mention first is if we have new members here tonight, one of the things that I always recommend new members, or for those members that haven't taken a lot of time to really go outside, and that's perfectly fine. Maybe you're somebody who likes to just read about astronomy, but maybe doesn't like to go out too much, but maybe you're interested in going back out to observe the night sky. So this might be a good refresher for you as well. So one of the first things that's very important with figuring out where to look in the night sky is your directions. If you're outside in the middle of nowhere, let's say you go out to a dark sky site or even your backyard or a field or some place, and you look outside and you don't know where north, south, east, west is, well, guess what? It's going to be extremely difficult for you to find things in the sky. The number one rule for observing the night sky is to know your directions. Now, if you have a compass available to you, a magnetic compass, obviously, or an analog compass, that can help you figure it out. Most of us have smartphones this day and age, and you can use a compass app. Those are, of course, helpful, but it doesn't show you the exact north. It shows you geomagnetic north, which is actually off by between 5 to 6 degrees. So in reality, when you look at geomagnetic north, you're actually not looking at true north, but it gives you generally the idea where north, south, east, and west is. But if you want to know exactly where true north is, we have something that's very, very, very special here in the Northern Hemisphere. We have a fairly bright star that's invisible to even in very light polluted skies that gives us true north. And of course, as you can see here, I have little cheat sheets here. We have letters here that represent the directions. But what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the north because this is the most important thing that we need to identify in the sky. So first things first, you want to get your compass out. And the compass will at least align you around north. It might align you a little bit this way or so on. But when you're looking at north, what you're going to see right here is if you were to measure about 30 degrees above the horizon, we'll talk a little bit more of the horizon in just a minute, you will notice this fairly bright star right here. Now, this fairly bright star is Polaris. And Polaris is very important because Polaris is what we call our pole star. The Earth is tilted at 23.5 degrees, and our axis of rotation, that's essentially the line that basically makes our, Earth, the line that we created that represents the axis of spin of the Earth, is essentially pointing towards Polaris. So as this Earth turns, and we're actually rotating to the east, everything will appear to rise in the east and set in the west. And all the stars except for Polaris will appear to move. Technically, if you want to get really super technical about it, Polaris does move. But to our human eye, since we have so much ability to resolve things, to our eyes, we don't really see that movement with Polaris. But it does move a little tiny baby bit. But to our eyes, it doesn't move. It's always pretty much fixed in that same location. So Polaris is a very, very important star because once you know where to find Polaris, you can then align yourself with north, east, south, and west. Now, if we are looking towards Polaris, imagine yourself, you're watching this right now, and what I want you to do is align your body with your computer screen, and then I want you to tilt your head 90 degrees to the east, or to the right, excuse me, to the right. Go ahead and tilt your head 90 degrees to the right. That basically faces pretty much east. Now, behind you, pretty much your back, would be considered south, and then tilt your head 90 degrees to the left, you will face west. Now, one of the little acronyms or one of the little sayings that people have for figuring out their directions is always going in a clockwise direction. So imagine the direction of your hands on a clock. You remember north, east, south, and west going right. So it's never eat soggy waffles. Very, very, very important to remember, never eat soggy waffles. Unless you're somebody who does like soggy waffles, then you might want to think of another thing that you don't like to eat that begins with letter S and W. Maybe sour watermelon or, whatever. So that's one of the things that we can help. Now, this is also very important because you need to know Polaris if you are using a German equatorial mount, because you want to align your telescope to Polaris, so that way your telescope will move in relationship to the stars in the sky. So again, very, very important. So the first things first, when you're identifying objects in the sky, you always want to find the location of Polaris, get your bearings around you, so that way you can begin observing the sky. Now, one of the things that we'll notice, we're going to zoom out just a little bit here. Now that we found Polaris, there's actually a group of stars right here. Actually, we'll zoom in just a little bit more, makes it easier to see. There are a group of stars that come off of Polaris right here. We have two other stars, and then 4 stars surrounding it. This is the Little Dipper. So right here we have the 4 stars for the cup, 3 stars for the handle. Now, a lot of the objects that we have in our sky, like the Big and Little Dipper, the Summer Triangle, the Teapot, those are actually not constellations. Those are what we call unofficial images called asterisms. These are shapes and patterns that people create that are technically not part of the official 88 constellations. The International Astronomical Union actually split up the sky into 88 regions of the sky. And those are from those classical, traditional constellations. And then, of course, the constellations that earlier explorers, especially in the southern hemisphere, came up with. So the technical constellation here, I'm going to turn on the labels, is Ursa Minor. This is the little bear right here. Now, just above Ursa Minor, if you take these 2 stars right here of Ursa Minor and you go up, or if you take Polaris and you go straight up, right above that right now in this time of year are the 7 stars of the Big Dipper. So we have the Little Dipper down here, and then up here we have the Big Dipper right here. Now, technically, the Big Dipper, again, is not a constellation, but these 4 stars right here represent the cup of the Dipper, and we have these 3 stars that represent the handle of the Dipper. But if we want to find the rest of the constellation, what I'm going to do now is I'm actually bring up some constellation lines here. And actually, the constellation Ursa Major includes stars that are past the bowl, and includes stars like this one here, which is the ear. We even have a star called Mushida, which is the nose. And down here, we have a couple legs and paws. Now, there are some really interesting things that are visible in Ursa Major. I'm going to go ahead and pick up a few. One of them is M51. And M51 is right here next to the star called Alkaid, right here. Oops, I accidentally hit the wrong button. I'm going to go back here. Now, just beyond this star Alkaid, which is the very tip of the handle of the Dipper. All right, so how to find it is you got the Big Dipper here, the handle, the last star, and the Big Dipper. You go pretty much in this time of year, you go straight up from it. And what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in here and take a look at that. This is a really beautiful spiral galaxy, and it has a companion galaxy that's actually interacting with. There's actually been recent images that actually show some other interesting interactive dust and gases, which have never really been seen before, which has been pretty phenomenal. But this is a great galaxy to look at, even in a fairly reasonable telescope. It's bright enough to be able to see a little bit of the dust lanes. So these lanes that spiral off from the central core of the galaxy in fairly modest dark skies. So if you're at Geneva, or if you're at Biolab Road or Chiefland or Kissimmee Prairie Preserve, you can see M51 fairly well. Now, if you have the ability to take live stacking images, this will be a very great object to look at. I know Frank and I, during some of our virtual star parties, have actually imaged this using a live stacking feature, and it does come out very, very nice. So M51 is a fantastic object to look at right now. In fact, actually right now we are located based on the galactic plane, if you will. Essentially, we are kind of above the galactic plane right now in an area where we are unobscured by the galaxy. So we call this galaxy season. Most of the objects that I'm going to be pointing out tonight are going to be galaxies, because we are facing away from the galaxy itself and looking into intergalactic space. And this intergalactic space is how we can see all these other galaxies. Another galaxy that's very nice to look at in this area is M110 there. Oops, no, sorry, M101, excuse me. All right, we're going to go, there we go. All right, M101, there we go. So M101 is another galaxy that is very, very, very nice to look at in the sky. Now, we're going to go back to this star Alkaid here, but instead of going up towards M51, we're going to go down a little bit. And when we get there, we'll see this beautiful pinwheel galaxy, another fantastic object to look at. Just like M51, this is another spiral galaxy, a beautiful galaxy to look at in this area of the sky. So again, another fantastic area to see in the sky. So yeah, so this is the these are what I would consider the pinnacles of the objects in the sky this area. The other one I want to talk about around Ursa Major that's fantastic to look at. There's a couple more objects that we can see in this area. So I'm going to bring up M81 and M82. So instead of going near the tail of the Dipper, we are going to head towards the kind of neck area of the bear. So this is a little bit harder to see. Of course, the other two galaxies were near the tip of the tail of the bear. This one here, we have the star called Doobie. Yep, that's a funny name for a star, but Doobie here, if you actually take this star, you can actually point this down to Polaris down here. So this is called one of the pointer stars. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to find this star Doobie, and we're going to kind of go down a few degrees. And then what we'll see here is M81 and M82. This is Bode's Galaxy and the Cigar Galaxy here. These are two very, very beautiful galaxies here. Again, we have another spiral galaxy, which is what we see with Bode's Galaxy and M81. And then we have M82, which is the Cigar Galaxy. It has this beautiful hydrogen starburst. You can actually see it. If I go down here, you can actually see it has this very rich starburst. If you're imaging this object, especially if you have a camera that has hydrogen alpha capabilities, you should be able to capture that really nicely. This is a great target to image, especially with a wider field of view telescope, because you can get both of those galaxies in there together in the field of view. So again, a wonderful group of galaxies to image. So those are my highlights. There's a couple of other galaxies. There's this one galaxy kind of over off to the side here. This is NGC 3077. This is the Garland galaxy. A lot of people don't actually image this galaxy. But actually, if you have a wide enough field of view, you can actually get all three of these galaxies. There's a lot of people who usually just take this area, but I actually, next time I image this area, I want to try to get all three of these galaxies together. When I image galaxies, I really enjoy seeing multiple galaxies in the field of view because it just explodes your mind, just, you know, how many galaxies there are. And we're going to talk about some other areas of sky that contain multiple galaxies. Now, mythologically, I want to talk a little bit about the mythology of these bears. That's another thing about the sky is why do we have these two bears up there? Well, if you are familiar with the moon of Callisto, the moon of Callisto is a moon of Jupiter. Now, fun fact, Jupiter, all the moons of Jupiter, Io, Europa, Callisto, Ganymede, are all flings that Jupiter, or in this case, Zeus, had. So, believe it or not, all the moons are named after the quote-unquote friends of Zeus or Jupiter. Well, Callisto was one of them. Callisto was one of Zeus's companions, and Hera actually played a trick on her, Callisto, and turned her into a bear, and the bear attacked Callisto's son, Arcus. And Zeus came in to save them and actually took them away from Earth and flung them into the sky where they could be safe. So the reason why there are two bears in the sky are these, is originally Callisto was transformed into the big bear, and then Arcus was eventually transformed into the little bear, and now they're up there in the sky. There's a cool mythology of the Big Dipper. It's from the Lakota people. Where they believe that these are the seven sisters that were chased after a great giant bear, and a great spirit transformed a tree stump into a gigantic mountain and put them into the sky. Many of you have probably visited this magical giant tree stump before. In fact, maybe extraterrestrials have visited. I'm just joking. But this is actually Devil's Tower. Devil's Tower in Wyoming is this mythological tree stump. It's not really, but to the people, the indigenous people of this area, they believe this was an ancient tree stump that sent these seven sisters into the sky as the Big Dipper, or the seven stars in the Big Dipper. So again, there's some really cool mythology and some legends of the night sky. Even the Chinese, actually, we talk about Asian astronomy. I have a program coming up. The North Star represented the Jade Emperor, the great deity that watched all over humankind. And it was a very important area. A lot of Chinese star maps have Polaris in the very center of the star map because they saw that as essentially the most important area of the sky. Now, located in between Ursa Major and Ursa Minor here is a group of stars that kind of snake around it. This right here is Draco, the dragon. Yeah, Draco, the dragon. It's actually one of my favorite constellations. I like Draco. I think it's a really cool constellation. Mythologically, Draco was the guardian of the apples of Hesperides. Hercules himself had to fight the dragon to gain access to those golden apples. And when he defeated the dragon, Hera placed the dragon into the sky. If you've seen Dragonheart, you probably remember the constellation Draco mentioned right there. Here we have the eyes of Draco. This is his head. We have his kind of front leg and his tail right here. One of the stars of, one of the stars, I'm trying to remember here. I'm having a drawing. There we go. I had to remember it. It took a while for me to, I was like, oh, which one is that again? Thebain. I wanted to talk real quick about Thebain. Actually, you can find Thebain. I just realized you can find Thebain by taking the two stars here in the Little Dipper and going up from there. What's special about Thebain is that Thebain, several thousand years ago, roughly about 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, the Earth actually wobbles or precesses. It essentially moves around, and the Earth's axis was actually pointed at Thebain. So many of the pyramids of Egypt are aligned with Thebain. Other archaeological sites in and around the world have been aligned with this area of the sky opposed to modern day, which is Polaris. So I thought that was kind of interesting to bring up there. And one of my favorite areas to look at in, I don't know if this is in here or not. We're going to look. Let's see here. Is it in there? Yes, it is. Okay, cool. Located in this area of Draco, kind of over here between this kind of triangle of stars, is a really nice, we call the Draco triplet, a really nice area of the sky to look at. Again, just like the Bode's galaxy, this area of the sky is very, very nice photographically. But these galaxies, you know, if you have a decent telescope and a dark enough sky, you can see some of these. But there's actually more than just 3 galaxies here. There's actually a smaller galaxy. There's a couple of other smaller galaxies in this area. This is another great target to image, especially if you have a little bit more wider field of view. You can get those 3 galaxies. Again, I love looking at pictures with multiple galaxies because it just gives you that context of just how big our universe is. All right. Now, one of the things that we're going to use next is we're going to head back to the Big Dipper right here. So again, we looked at Alkaid, we looked at Mizar, Alcor, we looked at all Alioth, we looked at all these stars here. Now, these 3 stars right here in the handle of the Big Dipper, one of the more traditional ways that we move around the sky is what we call star hopping. We hop from star to star to star. And one of the more famous star hopping techniques is this thing called arc to Arcturus. Now, what we want to do is we want to now make our way over to the eastern sky. And so you can see, if you look down here, we're looking towards east now. Now we're looking towards the eastern sky. What we're going to do is we're going to use these 3 stars of the handle of the Big Dipper, and we're going to arc over to Arcturus right here. Now, Arcturus belongs to the constellation Boötes. Now, I know some of you might be laughing because it looks like it's literally booties. In fact, you know, we've had kids and stuff at the planetarium go, look, there's booties in the sky, and everybody chuckles. It's kind of like similar to the Uranus thing, right? Well, the pronunciation is Boötes, and Boötes is actually the shepherd of the sky. He actually is one controlling and making sure the animals of the sky are behaving themselves, if you will. But Boötes is actually in an area known as the Boötes Void. There really isn't a whole lot of interesting stuff in this area compared to other areas of the sky, but this is a really nice constellation to look at. One of the things that a lot of people see when they look at Boötes is they see a kite shape. So here we have the frame of the kite, and then here we have the tail of the kite with Arcturus right here connecting to it. Now, just below Boötes right here, we're going to head down. We're going to take these shoulder stars right here. This star is called Theba, and this star is called Izar. What we're going to do is we're going to go below these stars right here, and we're going to eventually get to a star called Alphecca, which is this star right here, or Gemma. And this star is the main star in Corona Borealis. Everybody recognizes that word corona? Yeah, I'm sure all of you are used to the word corona by now. But Borealis literally means, or Borealis means northern. So this is the northern crown. I actually see more of like a necklace rather than a crown here. It has kind of a bowl shape, but I see kind of like a necklace here opposed to a crown. But down below Corona Borealis is the famous constellation of Hercules. Yeah, so if you go just below our Corona Borealis here, you have the constellation of Hercules. That's right. And located in Hercules, one of the things that people see when they find Hercules is what we call the Great Keystone. Think of the keystone of Pennsylvania, right? It looks like a keystone. These 4 stars here that connect in the middle there. And located in Hercules is M13, the Hercules globular cluster. And we're going to zoom in here. And actually, if you have really good eyes, you might see a fuzzy star in this area. But if you even use a pair of binoculars, it really resolves. But globular clusters are another very cool thing to look at this time of year. Located above and below our galaxy are a halo of these globular clusters. These clusters are home to very old stars, aging between 8 to 12 million years old, or billion, excuse me, not million, billion years old. You can see that many of the stars located in this globular cluster are very yellowish orange, indicating that these are very old stars. They're all gravitationally bound to one another. If you ever heard of Isaac Asimov, he wrote a book called Nightfall and actually talks about the idea of what would it be like to live in one of these globular star clusters, where you'd have essentially perpetual sunlight. All these stars are so bright that it makes it almost difficult, except for immediate time when, I think once every 2,000 years in the book, he talks about there's a great eclipse that allows all the other viewers to see all these other stars. But anyways, the Hercules star cluster is a very, very beautiful globular cluster to observe, even with a very small telescope. So if you have a small refractor or a small Dobsonian, even a pair of binoculars, this is a great object to look at through those. So take a look at M13 right here. Now, that goes a little too far. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to head back to Boötes. Now, remember, to find Boötes, we use the handle of the dipper. We're going to arc to Arcturus over here. Now what we're going to do is, you can see here, if we were to continue in that direction that we were going with the handle, we can then speed down to Spica, this bright bluish star right here. Speed down to Spica. And located here is Virgo. Yeah, Virgo. Now, Virgo is kind of special to me because Virgo represents, in the Greek mythology, Demeter or Demeter. According to the ancient Greek mythology, when Virgo is visible in the sky, that's the time when spring begins in summer. And then when Virgo disappears, she's mourning for her daughter, Persephone. And that signifies the changing of seasons. So Virgo is highly associated with the growing season and harvest season. So again, ancient astronomers used astronomy to foretell time. They were there to foretell and to realize the significance of the motion of the stars. So again, they didn't have Google Calendar back then. They didn't have clock, well, not the clocks that we have today. They had to rely on the sky to help them figure out the time of year. And Virgo was one of those constellations that they used. Now, located in Virgo is, I'm going to pick this one just because it's there. There is a really beautiful area called Mercurian's Chain, and actually contains lots of galaxies like M86, M84, all these different other galaxies, the eyes, all these galaxies. I think this is M87. That's actually the galaxy that was imaged of the supermassive black hole by the various Event Horizon telescopes. And there are so many galaxies here. And again, this is a fantastic object to image in the sky. You could just zoom in and you could just look at all of these small galaxies out here. And this is part of what we call the Virgo supercluster of galaxies. And technically, the local group of our galaxies, we live in the local group, which contains Andromeda, the Triangulum galaxy, so on. Actually belongs to the great supercluster of Virgo. So this is, again, just part of those clusters of galaxies, part of that mega supercluster of galaxies there. So again, it's super neat to imagine these things. When you look at these areas of the sky, your imagination runs wild and imagining, all these galaxies out there. So again, take a look in this area of Virgo. So again, Virgo is a little bit more challenging to observe from the constellation wise. Of course, Spica is down here, but a lot of people see kind of right here is another kind of like a trapezium or like a diamond shape. And then we have a couple of stars that are coming off of it here. But really, honestly, just go. One of the things I use is actually this star over here called the nebula, and we'll actually talk about that next. One of them, we're going to head down to the southwest, and we're going to look at a constellation right next to Virgo called Leo, Leo the Lion. And we have kind of this sickle shape here. I like to see it as Captain Hook's hook, a pirate hook, if you will, in the sky. This is the hook shape of Leo with the star Regulus right here by the heart. At the very back of Leo, we have a star called the Nebula. And honestly, I use the nebula as a marker for the Markarian's chain. So basically, I kind of use these two stars here. This is Zosma, and this is the nebula. And Zosma and the nebula actually point kind of in the area where the Markarian's chain is. And essentially, a nice thing about this area is that there's so many galaxies that you could just point your telescope at this general area, and you'll just be amazed at how many galaxies that you see. But just below, just below Leo's back here is another group of galaxies. Right here, this is the Leo triplet of galaxies. Another beautiful cluster of galaxies. We have the Hamburg galaxy, and we have M66 and 65. Let me see if I can turn off time. There we go. And this is also another great group of galaxies to observe this time of year. So as you can see, lots of galaxies to enjoy in this part of the sky. So what we're going to do now is we are going to head down. We're going to go back to Virgo, and we're going to head down south of Virgo to a little group of stars right here called Corvus the Crow. Now, if you for all my friends here tonight, I don't know about you, but Corvus, I mean, a lot of these constellations, you really got to use your imagination. I'm sure that they had enhancements that were going on that were helping them see these things. A lot of these just really don't look like what they are, but some people see here's the head and the wing and this foot and all that. But actually, I see a baseball diamond here. Imagine here we have home base, first base, second base, third base, right? Well, that's Corvus. It's just really just a diamond shape. But one of the really cool galaxies to observe in this area. I was going to, it's M104. There we go. M104 is a really nice galaxy to look in this area. If you basically go to third base and go up, you're going to head to the Sombrero galaxy. And this is a lenticular galaxy. There's actually a debate whether this is a lenticular or a spiral galaxy. Seen edge on. There's still some discussion about that. But either way, it's a really neat. I prefer the term UFO galaxy than Sombrero galaxy because I see it looking like one of those old-fashioned flying saucers that you see in those old science fiction movies. So I see that. But again, another great target to look at, M104. And what we're going to do is we're going to head down from Corvus. We're going to head down over here. We're going to zoom out a little bit because this thing is monstrous. And this star here, we're going to go to, there's Alphard right there, Alphard. Alphard is the main star in Hydra, this whole large area of the sky that starts all the way from below Regulus, down here in the head, all the way around past Crater the Cup to the back area of Corvus near Spica. This is actually considered to be the longest constellation in the entire sky. Single constellation, because technically the Argo Novice, or the Argonaut ship, is the largest, but it's not technical anymore because it is now broken into 3 separate constellations. So this is the largest. It's actually a little bit larger than Eridanus, actually, in terms of degrees in the sky. But one of the more famous areas to look at in Hydra, and Hydra was the snake that essentially Hercules fought after, is M83, this beautiful barred spiral galaxy. A lot of astronomers actually think our Milky Way looks a lot like M83. again, it contains that barred spiral shape to it. So again, so this is a very, very nice barred spiral galaxy. And you can actually see there's all these smaller galaxies in there if you image that area of the sky. So anyways, now, interestingly, just rising here in the, now the time that we're at is about 11 o'clock at night. If you wait till after midnight, eventually you'll see rising just above the sky here is Centaurus. And Centaurus is generally a southern hemisphere constellation, but we're low enough in latitude where we see a little bit of Centaurus. And of course, one of the famous areas of Centaurus is the Omega Centauri area. I think Frank or one of the members imaged this recently, and this is one of the largest globular clusters. Actually, there's debate on that, if it's considered a dwarf galaxy and not rather a globular cluster. So maybe if you have the opportunity to catch it for its limited run in the sky, go ahead and give that a try. Now, I want to talk about, before we finish up here, I want to talk about a constellation that's currently not in the sky because of the fact we actually, it's only, the reason why I want to talk about it is because of the what's happening. If you wake up early in the morning, you'll see the constellation of Cassiopeia right here. And Cassiopeia is actually kind of exciting right now because there is a nova that is currently visible in, that's naked eye visible, technically, if you have dark enough skies to see it, inside Cassiopeia. And I'm just trying to get the exact coordinates here, right here. So yeah, there it is. Okay, so this nova, it's a new star. You know, obviously it's now visible. Is kind of, I can probably send the exact coordinates, but just over here we have Cassiopeia, which is seen as this W or M, and then we have this constellation here called Cepheus, the King. And kind of this star right here in Cepheus aligned with the back star of Cassiopeia. This star is called Kaph, and then this star is, there's really no name for it. In kind of this area right here is where this nova is. So again, I could probably get the exact RA and declination of this if you want to observe it. But there is a new star, or nova, observed in this area of the sky, and it is actually technically naked eye visible. So give that a try there. But anyway, so I don't want to inundate you with so much information tonight. I really wanted to focus on what the sky was like right after sunset, a few hours after sunset, focusing on this part of the sky, the spring. Of course, in the next couple of months, we'll be moving into the summer. And eventually, once we get to summer, we'll eventually, we'll have some really great observing for the Milky Way area. We'll be looking at Sagittarius, Scorpius, Ophiuchus, Capricorn, Aquarius, so on. And these are going to be in the summer triangle, Cygnus, and so on. So maybe I'll be doing a mini program on those areas of the sky. But I hope that this program tonight has inspired you to get out and to take a look at some of these really interesting galaxies in the sky, some other interesting objects, and have a little bit more of an understanding of what we have in our sky tonight. So thank you so much for listening to me here, and happy stargazing, everybody.
Thank you, Derek. And yeah, just one more month of the days getting longer, and then we start getting back to longer nights. Derek, there was a Q&A question for you during your talk. Somebody wants to know what software you're using. I think I know, but I'm going to let you answer.
Sure. This is actually a wonderful software called Stellarium. I can go ahead, once we get done with this part, I can go ahead and post that in the chat. Stellarium is a free software. You can actually download it on your iPad, your laptop, desktop, even your phone, and it is a fantastic software. And you actually, there are people, since it's a open source software, people are uploading new data all the time, including comets. I think there actually is a upload on the NOVA. I haven't yet gotten a chance to download it. But there are lots of satellite data, all these different things that you can actually download into the software and observe that way. So Stellarium is the name of the software.
Cool. Thanks, Derek. And you're actually up next. Remember
Okay.
Astrophotos and Sketches too. So
Sure, yeah, we can
keep on rolling.
All right, yeah. So I figured I'll finish up here with the astrophotos. We don't have a lot right now. We have a few images this month. If you did submit something and you don't see it, I do apologize. I've been having some trouble with my email the last last week or so, but I believe I got everyone's image. And anything else, if I did not get to this image, I do apologize. I'll make sure to add that to the next month's round. But if you do see your image, if you don't mind, what I'm going to do, I know some of our images here are already people that are part of the panelists, but we do have a couple of members that have submitted their photos and aren't part of that. I'll go ahead and allow you to talk if you want to mention a little bit about your images and any other technical details or anything else you'd like to bring up with that. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen here. So the first one actually, I believe, is Richard Wright's sun picture. So Richard?
Oh, close to home. Yeah, so I've had an opportunity to play with a Daystar solar telescope the last few months. This is a Solar Ready 127, which is a 127 millimeter refractor. It's coated and optimized for solar observing, and it has a really nice high-end Daystar filter in the back of it. Always looking for a teaching opportunity. I thought I would send this picture in two different ways. The image on the left is actually how we photograph the sun. Most of the images you see, like the one on the right, are false color. We use these filters that let through just the hydrogen alpha, which is a particular electron. Anyway, it's from hydrogen gas. Before I mess all of that up, so hydrogen gas, the sun does have a lot of hydrogen, and it emits a certain wavelength of light. And if we filter out all the light but that hydrogen alpha wavelength, we get to see quite a bit of detail. Of course, that one wavelength of light shows up best on a monochrome camera. It actually, if you use a color camera, it will only activate the red pixels. If visually, because you can use this telescope visually as well, it's actually an electric neon pinkish color. It's a reddish pinkish color. It just looks very electric to me. And I tried colorizing it to look the way it does in the scope, but I just can't. Nothing I've ever seen does it justice on a computer monitor. It's just glowing in the telescope. But these yellow and orange treatments, like for this sunspot and active region group here, these are very pleasing, and it's what people expect the sun to look like. And so most of the time, the images are colored that way after the fact. But it was, let's see, Solar Ready 127 from Daystar. It was the chromosphere version of the scope. It's a really, really great scope. It's a bit, you got to be really serious. It's a heavy investment if you buy one. The camera though was a ZWO 120 mm, so it was a really cheap monochrome high-speed camera from ZWO, and I used Sharp Cap to capture the images, and I used Auto Stacker and something called I can't remember the name of it. It's not Registax. Maybe I'll do a mini program on it sometime. But I use something other than Registax, which is what most people use on the sun and moon for this particular image. But it's all, is free software. So if you can afford the equipment, the software is mostly free once you bought the hardware. But that's it. So, yep. Take it away.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Richard. All right, so our next image is, I believe, from John Starr. And let me just go through the attendees list here. I believe, John, you're on here. So I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk if you want to mention a little bit about this image.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So, so this, and by the way, I'm a new member, so I'm looking forward to meeting everyone once we can resume that again. But I was very much looking forward to this weekend since we actually had clear skies for a change though. So I actually shot this target twice. I shot this one. I shot with sort of the Red Cat 51 and my Canon RA mirrorless camera, and so with essentially a bunch of 1 minute exposures, so about 2 hours and 46 minutes total integration time. It's a nice target. So this is M8, the Lagoon Nebula. I'm sure everyone's sort of familiar with this. It's quite a forgiving target, so it lends itself well to a wide field, sort of a reasonable setup here. And so also it's neat in this image is, sort of located in this Sagittarius arm, as there's a couple other things you can kind of see in here. So the Trifid Nebula is kind of off there to the left, and there's the starfish cluster, which is kind of very close to the right there. So it's kind of fun. I did use a filter here. I'm in Winter Park, so I took this in my backyard, and it's Bortle 8, 9. And so when you look up, you kind of guess where things are, particularly when you're shooting with sort of a mirrorless camera. But essentially, I used the Optolong L-Enhance filter, which was sort of fun. Particularly, it's almost necessary from my backyard. And the software I used essentially was Deep Sky Stacker, and then I sort of processed it with sort of Photoshop. So.
Excellent. Yeah, this came out really great. When you sent this picture to me and you told me your location, I was like, wow, that RA really did a really great job on. And you did a really good job at processing this from the location. So it's very promising for those that are afraid to image because they think, oh, I'm in, Orlando, or I'm in, a really light polluted place. So there are technologies today that just make taking images of the night sky much easier because of those filters and things like that and the cameras. John, you're going to be, I think this is your other image that you submitted.
Sure. Yeah. So same target. So again, it's always fun to sort of shoot a target with sort of different setups. This is much different. So again, another sort of wide field sort of setup here. I used sort of the Skywatcher Esprit 80 ED, and I used a monochrome camera. I used the ZWO ASI 1600 Pro cooled camera, and several sort of narrowband filter sets. So Sulfur 2 and HA and O3. But this was a bit longer. So this one, or the last photo, was about 2 hours 45 minutes or so. This one was 7 hours and 4 minutes. I typically like to shoot at least 20 hours or so when I'm doing sort of narrowband. But this is such a nice bright sort of target that I could get away with only 7 hours or so. But essentially, this was 106 4-minute exposures. It was about equal between the three sort of narrow bands. And then again, I used astrophotography tool as the capture software, Deep Sky Stacker, and Photoshop. And so the scopes were literally right next to each other when I was taking this. So a much different setup, but it's sort of fun sometimes to see a target like this. And again, you can see the starfish cluster sort of off to the right there on the side.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, this just again turned out really great, and proof that you can do some really great stuff from that part of the city. So, all right. Next image, I believe, is Richard again.
Yep, that's me too. This is Messier 9, a globular cluster in Ophiuchus. I took this with a remote setup that I'm a partner on. It's out in California near Lake San Antonio, really good skies. This is it's really cropped down. The dark area at the bottom left is not a terribly calibrated image. There's actually this is like right over Bernard 64, which is a big cloudy dark area. And this spot in Ophiuchus is a very rich star field, and it's got this big cloud. This is actually cropped down quite a bit. The telescope was an Esprit 150, and the camera was a ZWO 6200, which is a really big high-resolution chip. So I have a very have a much larger image of the whole area, and I may spend some more time on the to try to do that cloud area justice. Right now, it just looks kind of brown, but I love this. I love globular clusters. So I thought kind of a tight shot cropping on this globular cluster with all these background stars would be pretty cool. It's pretty far in the south. It's kind of hard for me to get at my regular dark sky site, which is down in South Florida, but Okeechobee lights up the sky down there. So this is a good target to shoot from my remote place. Ophiuchus, by the way, is the 13th sign of the zodiac, and I'm going to let Derek tell you about that in a future planetarium program. I'm pretty sure he has, like you do, that is you, right? That has that 13th sign planetarium
Yes.
program? Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So I'll just leave that as a teaser for one day. Derek will surprise you and tell you all about the 13th one. But yeah, M9, the CA9, really cool globular. So that's it.
Fantastic. Yes. All right. And our next image goes to Frank. I believe, Frank, this is your image. Frank Kane.
Yeah, speaking of globular clusters, this is Omega Centauri. And Derek talked about the constellation Centaurus earlier. It just kind of peaks above the horizon for maybe an hour or so in the middle of the night. And it's in the south, which is an incredibly light polluted part of the sky for me here. So, not the prettiest picture I've ever taken, but it was just a challenge to get it at all. And this is a very cool object as well. This is actually, as Derek mentioned, there's some debate as to whether this is even a globular cluster. It might just be the core of a dwarf galaxy that we captured, which makes it even more fascinating. And this thing is super old. It's like 11 billion years old. And if you do consider it a globular cluster, it is the biggest, brightest, most massive one by any measure. So really cool object and a tough one to capture. Just excited to capture that. It's only like 14 degrees above the horizon here at its highest point. So a really tough object to capture.
It's the flying spaghetti monster.
Yes.
It is definitely a challenge. And of course, the further south you go,
that is a tough target. Yeah, it's
better
tough
it is.
to shoot from here. To give a little plug, if you come to the Winter Star Party in the Florida Keys, it's right over the ocean. It's a really great place to get your showcase shot of Omega Centauri, really.
Fantastic. All right, and Frank, you have another very tough target as well.
Yeah, just a little bit above Omega Centauri is Centaurus A, which is a galaxy in Centaurus. This one's a little bit higher, about 20 degrees, but still challenging, especially from where I am here. Really cool galaxy, though. It's like the 5th brightest one in the sky as seen from Earth, but we know surprisingly little about it from what I could tell. It's somewhere between 10 and 16 million light years away. You'd think we know better, but it's somewhere in that range. But the cool thing about it is that it has a supermassive black hole in the middle of it. And if you look at this thing in radio wavelengths, you can see these huge jets shooting out of it. It's a very active galaxy. It's what we call a starburst galaxy that's generating a lot of new stars. And people don't really know what it is. Some say it's a lenticular galaxy. Some say it's an elliptical galaxy. Some say it's a spiral galaxy colliding with an elliptical galaxy. My money's on that one. Anyway, both of these last images were taken with a Skywatcher MN190 Mach-Newtonian telescope with an ADIC 383L plus camera and less than an hour total exposure time because that's how long it was above the trees.
All right, fantastic. All right, well, that's all I have for tonight for the Astrophoto Showcase. Thank you so much, everybody. And
thank you, Derek.
Back over to Richard.
All right, so let me get the right thing clicked on. My minute on the moon is next. Let me share the screen. All right, this is going to be a short talk. It is only a minute. So, all right, so this month is through the looking glass, looking at the moon through different optics. We'll start with how the moon looks through to the naked eye or through binoculars. When we do that, north is up, south is down, and east is to the right, like you'd expect on a proper Earth map or globe. All pre-1960s lunar maps and a few holdouts from the early 70s had east and west reversed on the moon. Once we started actually going to the moon, I love that phrase, by the way, we wanted to label it like a proper world or globe, so the IAU declared the direction should be reversed moving forward. Looking through Newtonian, such as a Dobsonian mounted telescope, north and south are inverted or upside down. In fact, many moon maps and atlases will print their charts and images with south up because they claim most telescopes present this view. I find this to be highly annoying since none of my telescopes actually do this. Okay, I lied. This one does, but I don't use that on the moon very often. Most of the time, I'll use a refractor, which also does have south up, but we almost always use a star diagonal on our refractors. And this puts north back at the top like we want. But of course, now east and west are mirrored, so things get a little hairy. This is get exactly the same view with Schmidt-Cassegrain, which are also, of course, wildly popular, or with a Mac-Cassegrain, which is also a really great telescope for lunar observing. So most of the time, north is up, not south, and east and west are just reversed, just like in the olden days. And I wish they would make charts that way. You can just get all kinds of weirdness and reverse everything, but you need 3 mirrors, such as a Naismith telescope. It's a really weird telescope design, and I would tell you all about it, but I only had a minute, and now that's gone. And that's it. That was a minute on the moon. So next is Eric Hoin with his, wait a minute. Too many things. Oh no, Bill Castro. Bill Castro is next with his micro guide eyepiece. Bill, are you ready to go?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
Let me share my screen. And yeah, I want to do, what did I do?
I'm not going to mock you because I was just doing exactly the same thing.
Deja vu all over again.
Exactly. And now it's just your turn.
Okay. I figure I click enough and sooner or later you get it. There we go. I'm going to talk about the micro guide eyepiece. I bought one of these from Celestron maybe 15 plus years ago. And over the past couple of years, I've dusted it off, so to speak, and started using it. I thought I'd share this with everybody. You can see it there on the right, in the lower right, there is the eyepiece. Hopefully you can see my mouse. The new ones you buy now are from Demeter Planetarium, and there's the battery goes in this battery compartment that sticks out in the upper right, and the knob there adjusts the brightness and turns it off. This is what it looks like when you're looking through the eyepiece. It's a really fuzzy picture. When you're actually looking at it, it looks a lot sharper. It's a 12.5 millimeter eyepiece, and there's 4 scales. I'll get into that. And in the interest of time, since this is a mini program, I'll just talk about measuring angular separations and separations and position angles for double stars, and the sizes of some of the objects that I've looked at over time. I've got some examples of how to calibrate that linear scale for your telescope, and measuring objects such as the Great Red Spot and the lunar crater, and measuring a double star. I kind of like to think of it as a protractor in an eyepiece. And so when you look through the eyepiece, this is a little better resolution of what you can see, but the 12-page manual really goes into detail and gives a lot of good examples. So I'm just going to briefly cover what some of the things this thing can do. But labeled 1 is the linear scale. It's obviously goes straight across, goes from 0 to 60. There's a semi-circular position angle scale. That's number 2 here. That's for measuring. It's good for measuring tight double stars and their angles. Guiding circles is number 3. I won't get into that. And then the large circular scale is 4. That's this that goes all the way around. I'll discuss that. I use that more for measuring double stars. Now, the math is included in the manual. You don't really need to understand how it's derived, but you do need to know how to plug in values into an equation to get the result. And it's important you use the proper units. Like millimeters or kilometers or whatever, and they tell you what that is. So to calibrate the linear scale, say it's exactly 6 millimeters across, there's 60 small divisions total across the thing. And the distance between a small division that they've etched in it is 100 microns. That's approximately the width of a human hair, but when you're looking through it, there is more space in there. It's not hard to see the space in between. And then to calibrate that linear scale, if the manufacturer gave you the focal length of their telescope that you're using, it's just one small division equals 20,626 divided by that focal length. And again, keep your units right, and the focal length is in millimeters. And on the bottom line there, you see an example the manual gives for a C8, and it's a popular 10-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope, or I'm sorry, an 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope. It's an F10, so the focal length is 2,000 millimeters. And it's important to note there's no Barlow or power mate that's going to multiply that in this optical train. And you see the equation on the line is comes out to 10.3 arc seconds for one small division. Now, if your focal length isn't known, or if you're using a Barlow or you want more accuracy, you can use the drift method, which is how long it takes for a star to pass along that linear scale with the telescope drive turned off. Then you calibrate it that way. And the easiest thing I found to do was to aim at a star south, close to the celestial equator, and you position the linear scale so that the star will drift across it from 0 to 60. And you just time that movement. And the equation there is a small division in arc seconds is that time you measure times the cosine of the declination angle of that star in degrees, and all of that divided by 4. And the manual strongly recommends doing that for Barlows or Schmidt-Cassegrain telescopes, because with a Barlow lens, the light coming out of that Barlow is expanding, and the further away your eyepiece is from that, the more magnification it'll give, and it'll make that focal length longer, or the effective focal length of the whole optical train. And so you're never really sure where that is with any given eyepiece. Just depends on how the spacing is. And so it's a good idea to measure that. With Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope, the primary mirror moves back and forth in order to focus it. And so it may or might not be exactly, that 2,000 millimeters for a C8. So it's a good idea to measure it. Oops. Okay, so here's the example for calibrating that linear scale. I did this with my 130 millimeter refractor, and the manufacturer stated that was in a focal length of 910 millimeters. And then I also added a TelView 2.5x power mate. Now the power mate's a little different than the Barlow, but it still multiplies the focal length by 2.5. But it's a different optical system to do that. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But you can see here on the right, I start with and the resolution of this graphic is pretty much what you see. You have no problems looking at the numbers or the spacing between these small divisions. But I start with the center of the star at 0, and you time it going all the way across till the center of the star hits 60. And I did that 5 times, and I took the average of those 5 measurements, and it took me 36.858 seconds. I used the star Procyon for that drift method. And I looked up Procyon's declination from a Planetarium application. I used Sky Safari, and that was 5 degrees, 10 arc minutes, 36 arc seconds. You convert that to a decimal number, and you divide all these by 60 and add it to the next one, so forth. You get 5.177. I don't want to get too bogged down in math, but if anybody has any question, it gets send me an email later and I can get into that in more detail. But you plug all of that into the equation, you can see how the math goes here. And I came up with 9.18 arc seconds for one small division. Now, the other thing you can do is you can use it to accurately determine the focal length of the optical train. Say you have a Barlow and you want to know how much magnification you're doing, you can use something like this. If you know the distance from the Barlow lens to your, say your image focal plane for an imaging system, they give you the equation for that. If you can see the focal length is 82,506 divided by this quantity here, time, and the cosine of the declination in degrees. So just doing a double check for the values from before for my 130 millimeter refractor with the power mate, plugging those values into this equation here, I get a focal length of 2,248 millimeters. Now, based on the manufacturer specifications, you go with a focal length of 910 for the refractor, then you multiply that by 2.5 for the power mate. That comes out to 2,275 millimeters. So it's a 1.2% error, not too bad. And that's kind of highlights the difference between a power mate. I think the power mate's multiplication factor will be close. They have an example in the manual for using a Barlow and then a C8 with a different kind of diagonal. And you can get, 5% or more error. So, Barlows will be a little bit off. And depending on your diagonal, if you have a different visual back on your Schmidt-Cassegrain, it can be a little different too. So it's a good idea to calibrate it. So once you've calibrated it, you can measure angular separation of multiple stars, the size of sunspots, height of prominences, and they give an example for the crater Copernicus. And in red is the equation for the size of an object. And B is the size of the object. And again, keep your units right. It's kilometers. R is the distance to the object in kilometers. F is the focal length of the optical train that you're using. And A is the image size in millimeters. And remember, one small division was 100 microns or 0.1 millimeters. And you can see down here in their example, using that same C8, it's a very popular scope, Copernicus appeared 5 small divisions with a C8, not using any Barlow. And that times 0.1 millimeter is 0.5 millimeters is the value for A, is the image size. Then they looked up in an almanac and stated the moon's distance was 377,000 kilometers at the time of the observation. And you can see, plugging that into the equation right here, they come up with 94 kilometers. I looked up in my Atlas of the Moon, my Ruckel, that's a good reference book there, and it's listed as 93 kilometers. So that's pretty darn close. And then you can rearrange the equation and you get the distance to it if you know what the size of the object is too. So if you know one, you can calculate the other. Now, I did this recently. I was observing Jupiter. It's one of my favorite planets to look at. And I've been noticing the red spot's been getting smaller and smaller. I'm wondering, am I seeing things or whatnot? So in 2019, I observed and measured Jupiter's great red spot. I used an older refractor that I had at the time. I didn't have a new one yet. And that's a 127 millimeter. That's an f7.5 with a 2.5 power mate again. So that comes out to the equivalent focal length of 2,380 millimeters. And then the Planetarium software stated that Jupiter's distance was 733.6 times 10 to the 6. That's what that E6 means, kilometers at the time that I observed it. And again, I measured, half a small division. So again, here's the equation that you plug everything into. You got to figure out what A is. So here's how the units work out on that one. It's, half a small division, or 0.5 times 0.1 millimeters per small division. That comes out to 0.05 millimeters. And plugging that into this equation here results in 15,412 kilometers. I convert that to miles, and I come up with 9,577 miles. Then I looked up online and I noted, well, how close is this thing? And the Great Red Spot in 2017, it was 10,159 miles. And doing a little more online research, I plotted this line and this graph you see on the right from observations noted from 1904. And no, I did not make that observation in 1904, not quite that old. But anyway, you can see it's pretty much a straight line going way down. And there's, 2017. So 2019 is probably somewhere down here, a little below 10,000. So that's pretty darn close. I was pretty happy with what I observed, I was able to measure. And the manual states that the accuracy can be 1/5 of a small division. And I do believe that you can, there's quite a bit of space in there when you're looking through the thing. And that works out for a C8 is 20 microns or 2 arc seconds, for one of those small divisions. You can get pretty good with this thing. So for measuring double stars, the first thing you want to do is figure out where north is. And that depends on the type of telescope you have, as Richard was mentioning before. And you can see on the bottom, I've got the left side is for an inverting or a Newtonian type telescope. And on the right side is examples with the left-right swap scopes, which is typical of a Cassegrain or refractor using a star diagonal. So to do that, you first center the primary star at the 30 mark on a linear scale. Excuse me, allergies are doing great. So 30 is right in the middle of the thing. Then you either turn off the drive or use the slow motion control, move it to the east until the star reaches the circular scale. And then you rotate the eyepiece so that the star lies on the 270 mark on the circular scale. With the drive turned off, stars will exit west. I think I have a mistake here. That should be west. Oh, you move it east. Yeah, if you move it east, it will go west. I'm sorry, that's right. And so once you rotate it to 270, for the Newtonian scope, north will be on the bottom. You want to use the numbers on the inner circle, inside of this circle. So you see 0 is on the bottom, 0 degrees is north. They'll increase in numbers as you go counterclockwise, going through east and so forth and so on. And here's an example. I turned this upside down so it was orientated with the reticles there. Where north is at the bottom, position angle would be going that way if the secondary star was up here. For the left or right swapped telescopes, you use the outer circle, so north would be on top. And the increasing numbers go clockwise, so you measure the angle clockwise. So now we've got where north is, just showing how you use it. Here's another picture I got online of the double star measurement that someone took through the eyepiece. And the definition of position angle is the direction from one object to the other. And again, it's north is 0 degrees, and you go through east is 90, south is 180, west is 270, and so on. So you orientate the circular scale like we discussed in the previous slide. You center the primary star on the 30 mark. And then you measure from 0 degrees north, depending on what kind of scope you have. So I did that with Iota, and that's a real pretty double star. It's a yellow-blue star. You can see it where it is in Cancer on the right. And you can see they use the same equipment. And so I kind of blew up the stars, enlarged them to, you can see them better here. But the separation is pretty straightforward measurement. And I got 3.4 small divisions. It wasn't quite halfway across. These blue and yellow dots don't really do the stars justice. They're kind of blown up. But multiplying by the scale factor, you can see here, I got 31.2 arc seconds. And looking up on my reference for double stars, separation was 30.7 arc seconds. That's pretty close. And then the position angle, you figured out where north is. And using the refractor with the diagonal, you use the outer circle. And then you draw an imaginary line to that outer circle, and I got 305 degrees. And looking up the position angle, it was 308 degrees. So again, I was real happy with that result. I'll take that anytime. So you can go online. Bader still makes it. Like a lot of things right now, everything's on back order. The second bullet here is the manual. You can download that and check it out. Now Meade has a similar eyepiece, and that's available in Astronomics, but that also is on back order. And so if you have any questions, give me an email either through the groups IO or my email directly there. And there's a lot of other applications you can do that the manual talks about. So that's pretty much all I've got.
Thanks, Bill. That's pretty cool. I have the Meade version of that, and I bought it maybe 20 years ago. It's a really cool eyepiece. I think any serious visual observer should have that in their toolbox for these kinds of things. So next up is either going to be Eric Hoin or
got you covered.
Frank. Okay, Eric is there. I don't see your name on the. Oh, you're on the panelist list. I was looking in the wrong place. Hi, Eric. I'm going to show.
Hey, Richard. Hey, let me get my screen going here.
Okay.
All righty, let's share this screen. Share. There we go. Let me bring that up.
All right, I'm going to be quiet. When I'm done, Frank, you can just jump right in.
How's that looking?
Or when he's done. That looks good. I see.
Nice. Okay, well, we're going to start a new series called 60 Seconds with the Sun. So a first installment of this series. I thought that I would begin with a little program that I already have together. This is much shortened. Usually once a year at least. There's a private school nearby that my son and daughter attended when they were younger. And I go there every year for a space astronomy day. And we do cool things like make a comet out of dry ice, go outside, do use the students to represent the different planets, and our sense of scale is for every 1 million miles per inch. So it shows them the relative, a good experiment on the size of the planets. Going to take a little more than 60 seconds here of my discussion, but sorry about that. So first, one of the things that when I'm doing a presentation is that I've been asked quite a bit, and young minds think a lot and they have very good questions. So one of the questions I get hit with is, what is the name of the sun? So that is our talk for today. 60 seconds with the sun, otherwise known as, hey, Saul, what's in a name? And so we know that planets have names: Jupiter, Venus, Mars, Earth. We know that galaxies have proper names, like the Andromeda Galaxy, the Milky Way Galaxy, nebula have names: the Saturn Nebula, Orion Nebula. And also many of the stars that we observe have proper names, such as Antares, Vega, Sirius. And I asked the students, does the sun have a name? A lot of them say, well, the sun. And actually, according to the International Astronomical Union, which is responsible for naming celestial bodies since the year 1922. I wasn't born then either, Bill, so, you know. The IAU uses the word sun for our closest star, but just like the moon, in order to be proper name, they capitalize the S in sun or the M in moon. And a lot of Latin is used in scientific terms, whether you're studying plants, animals, and of course in astronomy, it kind of folds over. And the use of the name Sol is included in many of our scientific terms. If you look at the depictions over on the right, you have the symbol for the sun. Okay, some derives from Roman, some Greek. You have the sun, okay, eminence of light, and you have the earth, Venus, stylized handheld mirror. You have Mars, shield and spear, and you have, and I hope I got this right, Derek, Uranus. If you take a look at the symbol for Uranus, that's the symbol in ancient Greece for heaven. And it was a combination of the symbol for the sun, which was emanating or unstoppable light, along with the spear from Mars, which was strength. So that was their symbol for heaven. But where did the word soul come from? Here we got ancient Greeks. They thought the sun was the god Helios. And according to mythology, Helios pulled the sun across the sky in a chariot with fire-breathing horses. So that produced the sun's heat. You can see Helios there, and he has sort of a crown, if you would, and it's showing emanating unstoppable light from there. And this is a depiction from the Athena's temple. Now, during the reign of the Roman Empire, there were a number of sun gods worshipped. The Greek god Helios, the Romans replaced with their Latin god called Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, because nobody was going to conquer the sun. It's there, shows up every day, emanates light, emanates heat. And so the root word Sol is what we continue to use for this very day. And here you can see the emperor from the year 280, Probus. And you can see his image, and you can see that crown of unconquerable light there. And if you look at the back of his coin, we have Sol Invictus there. And again, taken from the Greeks, the quadriga, which is a 4-horse chariot, unstoppable in war. To the common soldier, they had no chance against a 4-horse chariot. And so, let's go back. Not that far. And so we have Helios here. I'm sorry, Sol here. And you can see on the side where it says Sol Invicto or Sol Invictus there. So of course, whoever the golden rule, whoever had the gold makes the rules. Probus at the time had the gold. So his image, crown of unstoppable power, light, and then with unstoppable, the unstoppable sun is his emblem on the back of his coin. So the word Sol, a lot of it is poetic. So we call our sun Sol, and it's the word root to our sun system or our solar system. It's also the basic description for a day on Earth or other planets. Don't get ahead of me now. All right. And so on Earth and other planets, it's known as a solar day. However, thanks for being patient. Specifically, a solar day on the planet Mars, you know it, is called a sol. All right. Also, the root word sol is used in describing the solar wind. Now, the term sol scientifically for a day on Mars began with the Viking lander missions to Mars back in 1976. And they had to have a description to differentiate between a solar day on Earth, which is 24 hours, and a solar day on Mars, which is 24 hours, 39 minutes, 35 seconds. So that's when they started to call a solar day on Mars Sol. And of course, we have the solar wind, which was discovered by Dr. Eugene Parker at the University of Chicago in the 1950s. And we'll talk about Eugene Parker in another episode coming up. And of course, he discovered that the charged particles from the solar wind some get past the Earth's magnetic field, interact with our atmosphere, and the protons and electrons that from the solar wind that hit the Earth's atmosphere create our aurora borealis, or the northern lights. So, Mr. Bill Shakespeare, what's in a name like Sol? Our day, our science, our planet, our star, and our star system where we live. Sol's system, or our solar system. So with that was 60 seconds, maybe longer, with the sun. And I've got to say, instead of have a great day, I'm going to say have a great Sol. Thank you.
I want some fire-breathing horses. That's
oh yeah,
that'd be cool. All right, I'm going to take things over here. Let's see if I can pick the right screen here. All right, I think we're up. Oh no, we're not. That's the wrong screen. Oh, terrible. You'd think I know how to use Zoom by now. Oh, come on.
It looks like the right screen.
Yeah, I just lost my Zoom window somehow, which is kind of awesome. All right, well, I'm just gonna like take it on faith that you're seeing the right thing. So you see a slide, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Let's go.
Looks great.
Tell me if it spontaneously disappears. So anyway, yeah, we're going to talk about my new observatory. Just finished building it this week. And this is the new home for my beloved telescope, Scopy McScope face. We were going to call this Domi McDome face, but I think we ended up calling it Heimdall's Observatory, which is a Norse mythology reference. But anyway, purpose of this talk is to kind of talk you through the trials and tribulations of building this thing. And if you are thinking of doing something yourself in the future, hopefully some of this information will be useful. And if nothing else, just remember that I did it, and so have a few other club members. So that we're all here for you if you want to get some help through the process yourself. And so why would you want to build an observatory? Seems like kind of a crazy thing to do. It's a lot of money, a lot of things to take care of, takes up a lot of space in your yard. Well, Woody Allen was a weird guy, but he did get one thing right. He said that 80% of success is just showing up. And that's really the whole point of an observatory, to make sure that you show up more. Because really with photography, and this applies to astrophotography as well, it's really just about being in the right place at the right time most of the time, right? So when you have an observatory and it's clear outside, there's just no excuse for not observing. You know, it's all set up for you already. Push a button from your desk at home and you're taking pictures, right? So it just expands the opportunities for collecting awesome images. So with an observatory, you show up more. And if you have it set up to be automated and remotely controlled like this one is, You can just set things up ahead of time from indoors and not deal with mosquitoes, not deal with polar aligning your scope and setting up a pointing model and all that stuff. And hey, you can actually watch a movie with your family and take images at the same time. So, you know, if you're the sort of person who kind of like geeks out on the automation aspect of it and getting that working reliably, it's a very rewarding project. Now, if you are going to build an observatory, the first choice you have to make is what kind of observatory. And the two main contenders, there are many, but mostly people choose between a roll-off roof design and a dome. And there's a lot of pros and cons to both. A lot of people go with roll-off roofs, and there's a lot of good reasons for that. First of all, it's easy to build. It's cheap. It's just basically a shed where the roof slides off these two sets of rails on the top. And all you have to do is open it, and your scope is exposed to the sky. Shoot wherever you want. When you're done, you close the roof. Very simple, not a whole lot to break. And during the day, it looks like a shed. So, you know, your neighbors don't even know what's going on there. It just looks like where you're storing your lawnmower. So, and if you sell the house, you know, it's not that, you don't have to explain what it is. The downside, though, for this particular roll-off roof observatory, I would not want to own that thing in the middle of a hurricane. And guys, we live in Florida, remember. So you can just picture that roof getting blown off those rails and ending up in the pond next to you. You can imagine the wind picking that up off those little concrete piers and going flying. And that wood stick frame probably isn't going to last too long either. So there are ways of constructing roll-off roofs, observatories that are hurricane resistant, but it's hard, you know, and if you're not experienced in that sort of a thing, it's very easy to get it wrong. I went with the dome mostly because it's more wind resistant. You know, it's the reason you see these things on the tops of observatories on mountains. As the wind blows over it, it tends to push it down instead of up. So that's a big plus there. Yes, there are stories of domes blowing off, but you know, usually they're not constructed right. But living out on Merritt Island, which is kind of ground zero for hurricanes, that is definitely a big concern for me. So, you know, kind of the number one consideration for me was making sure this thing could withstand anything nature throws at it. And that includes bugs too. We'll talk about that more later. It is more expensive though. It's more difficult to build and to install, and it's more complicated because you don't just have to open it and shut it when you're done. That slit of the dome has to track the telescope as you're observing as well, and that introduces a whole new layer of complexity. So, you know, before you start building anything, you got to figure out what you're going to build. First step is to plan all this stuff out, figure out where you're going to put it. So do you have a spot in your yard that has clear views and ideally away from any heat and light sources? Can you blend it in with your landscaping somehow? Do you even want it in your yard? You know, an alternative is to put it somewhere remote, you know, like Richard's been doing that for a while now. But, you know, this being my first observatory, I wanted it to be someplace where I could get to it easily and fix things and, you know, deal with problems without having to travel too far, which is a big advantage. Think about your homeowners association, if you have one. If you need to get permission from the Architectural Review Committee, we'll talk about that more in a bit, but you may be in a situation where it's just a non-starter. So that's something to think about. Budget, whatever you think it's going to cost, it will cost twice as much. That is my experience. So make sure you got the cash for it. Figure out how you're going to get into it. You know, is there going to be a door? Do you just climb in through the slit? That's what I ended up doing. How are you going to get power to it? Networking, lighting. If this is going to be really far from your house, Wi-Fi isn't going to cut it. So you need some other plan. And what are you going to build the foundation out of? What's that dome going to sit on top of? Is it going to be a fiberglass base? That's a popular choice. You're going to build a concrete base? Well, pros and cons to that too. Wood is an option too, although if you're going to do that here in Florida, again, make sure it's wind resistant and termite resistant as well. Once you decide what you want to build, you got to get permission. If you do have a homeowners association, the first step is to get them to sign off on it. And my main tip here is to talk to them in person or on the phone. Do not just submit an application for an observatory out of the blue, or they'll say, what the heck is this? Denied, right? So what I did was I found out, you know, what's the contact email address for the guy in charge of our architectural review committee. I contacted him, said, hey, can we talk? And yeah, we talked, and I got him excited about astronomy and how cool it would be to have an observatory in our neighborhood and yada, yada, yada. He got all stoked about it. I submitted the application. Next day it came back approved. So talking to people often works more than just submitting a piece of paper. If they do say no, though, worst case scenario, you can usually get away with putting in a permanent pier, just a concrete pier to put your mount on top of. Throw one of those Telegizmos 365 covers on top of your scope when you're not using it. Gives you a lot of the advantages of an observatory without actually building one. So that's kind of a plan B there. Permits, if you keep it small enough, you probably don't need one, but you definitely want to do your research there. Here in Brevard County, if it's below 100 square feet and the concrete walls are 3 feet or lower, you don't need one. So I didn't need one, which is good. Probably needed one for the electrical stuff, but we'll ignore that. Next, you have to figure out how much of this you're going to build yourself as opposed to outsourcing. And you got to ask yourself, do you like working with concrete? And not only do you like it, are you really, really, really good at it? Because you have to build a foundation that is perfectly round and perfectly level. And that's not easy to do. So I would really strongly advise you to hire a professional if you're going to be building a pad for your observatory and or a foundation out of concrete. Here on Merritt Island, I used ABC concrete. And if you're anywhere near here, I'd recommend you give them a call because they've done one before now and know what's involved. If you're going to run electricity and networking to the thing, might want to use an electrician. I did, saved me a lot of hassle. They did not enjoy digging a trench 2 feet deep, 200 feet, but better them than me. You also have to think about where you're going to get the hardware from. You have to figure out the hardware for the pier. That's that concrete column in the middle of your observatory that you attach your mount to. I used a company called Dan's Pier Plates for that. And their websites are really a great resource on figuring out how to construct a pier and getting it to work reliably. Then you got to buy the dome itself. I went with Technical Innovations because they're located here in Orlando. And a couple of other club members have also purchased domes from them. I purchased a 10-foot home dome from them. And I know Barbara Harris and Fritz Lahn in the club have also purchased and installed domes from Technical Innovations. And their advice was actually very useful in getting this up and running quickly in my case. So if you do know people, and you do now because you know me, and you do this in the future, make sure you lean on their advice and their experiences. For example, by talking to them, I knew to order an extra drive motor and some extra rollers to make sure that that dome rotates absolutely reliably. And that really made a big difference. So thank you guys. You can really overthink the pier. Don't, is my advice. Never, ever go to the Cloudy Nights Forum. Actually, that's good advice in general, but especially don't go there looking for advice on how to build a pier, because there are people who overthink this to death. And they'll be like, oh my God, you're building a pier that's, going to deflect by 0.0001 arc seconds if you put a 100-pound force at the top moving laterally. This is unacceptable. No, that's BS. I promise you that a 12-inch concrete pier sunk 4 feet in the ground is going to be way more stable than your tripod on the driveway, which is what I was doing before. So don't overthink it. You do want to think about, however, how tall the pier should be. So you do need to do some math to figure out how tall does that pier need to be combined with the height of my mount such that my telescope will be pointing above the lip of the dome and, can turn freely inside the dome. So you definitely want to figure that out ahead of time, but you really don't have to overthink this too much. If you go to pierplates.com, they have some great resources there on how to construct a concrete pier and how, of course, to integrate that with the hardware that they sell for mounting your mount to the concrete pier. Some rookie mistakes to avoid that I almost did not avoid. Do not put rebar in your pier where you're going to be sinking mounting bolts. That would suck. Do not pour your pier before you have your mounting bolts. That actually happened to me because of a miscommunication. You not only need to have the mounting bolts ready to sink into that pier that will support your mount, you also need to have a template for positioning them accurately so that your pier plate will fit on top of those bolts. And you also need to know exactly where true north is relative to the pier because the pier plate has to be aligned to true north. So I use a trick for that. Obviously, you could use Polaris at night to get that right. But during the day, you can actually take a vertical stake, stick it in the ground, and use the shadow of that stake with an app on your phone to figure out where north is relative to that shadow. And that actually works really well. Oops, wrong direction. All right, so the next, now it's go time. Things go quickly from this point. So we call out the concrete guys. They actually built the foundation there. That's a 10-foot diameter foundation for the observatory itself. Then they built up the round concrete walls around it. Note that they actually filled in the holes in those cinder blocks, and that's so that we would have a solid foundation to sink the mounting bolts in for the dome itself. So another thing that you want to think about ahead of time. And you can see that concrete form in the middle for the pier as well. Again, really, really important to make sure that it's perfectly round and perfectly level. Otherwise, the dome will not rotate freely on top of it. And I could not think of a worse fate than putting all this time and money and effort into this project, putting the dome on top and then realizing that it can't spin. You don't want to be in that situation. So again, if you're not an expert at concrete, get someone else to do it who is. Concrete, by the way, is frowned upon as a material for building an observatory because it retains heat and radiates that heat throughout the night. But in practice, it really hasn't been a problem here. I've gotten some good images where the seeing is just as good as from my front yard. So again, don't overthink things. Next, they made it pretty. They just put a layer of stucco over it, made it all nice and smooth. Finally, the pier plate arrived. These, of course, were back ordered like everything in the world is right now. You can see there on the left my template for positioning those mounting bolts that get sunk into the concrete. And later on, the actual pier plate itself will attach to those bolts, and your mount will attach to that plate. And you can kind of see how that all went together there. Later on, much later on, the dome itself arrived, which is also back ordered by like 3 months. And this is what it looks like when it comes off the truck. One advantage of actually buying this locally from Technical Innovations in Orlando is the owner of the company will just drive it to you in his pickup truck. You don't have to deal with like freight shipping and all that stuff and pallets and all that nonsense. But yeah, it arrives in pieces. So some assembly required. And I highly, highly recommend doing a dry run of that assembly in the garage, where if you make mistakes, it's not going to result in half of your dome blowing off into the pond or falling to its doom. It's 4 feet down. You definitely want to work out all the kinks and practice this in a controlled environment before you're doing it outside where things can go wrong quickly. Once I did have that practiced, the next step was to actually put it on the concrete foundation. On the right there, you can see the dome support ring and the base ring. That's actually the hardest part of installing this thing because, again, that has to be perfectly level and perfectly round or else it won't rotate properly. After that, the dome itself goes on fairly quickly. This is basically a 2-day job here. Make sure you have help. It takes 3 people to do this. Next, install the weather monitor, the power, and the networking. Those are my pet ducks there. They've accepted me as part of their flock, I guess. But again, electricians are backed out 2 months as well. So I put up a temporary solar power system and a temporary Wi-Fi antenna so I could start playing with my dome earlier. Later on, the electricians finally did show up and we ran conduit 2 feet underground to stay within code. We cut every irrigation line in the backyard in the process, which was fun. But hey, that's the price you pay for having an observatory. And as of now, we actually have permanent power and networking through fiber optics running to the observatory, and it's done. It actually works. And I got little lights in there too, like little red and white lights in there. How cool is that? But yeah, that's pretty much it. Final step was putting in the actual equipment itself, getting it up and running. This is all the same stuff I was using before with the addition of the weather sensor monitor and the software to control the actual dome itself, which actually worked a lot better than I expected. You would think that keeping that dome slit synced up with the telescope would be not a reliable thing, but it actually is. So that was actually a pleasant surprise. That was pretty easy. And yeah, in the end, we have a dome. Again, if you want to do something like this yourself in the future, remember, CFAS is here for you. Myself and a few other club members have done this before, and there's a lot of pitfalls to avoid, a lot of advice, a lot of word of mouth stuff, a lot of tribal knowledge in this stuff. So feel free to reach out to us, post on groups.io if you are thinking about doing something like this in the future. And that's the show.
Very cool, Frank. Thanks.
Frank, I got a question for you.
Hit me.
All right. The concrete blocks, were they pre-cut? Because when the the observatory was put together at UCF, they had some poor soul that stood out there with a concrete saw and raised a mountain of concrete dust to take like 3 degrees off each block,
Yep.
so that they would eventually wind up in a circle. So were they already precast?
They were not. There was a poor soul with a concrete saw in my backyard, cutting them all down to size. So,
Wow.
yes. Again, you don't want that poor soul to be you. Outsource that if you
That's
can.
right. That's right.
Wow. I have a question.
Thanks.
That looked like a great fish pond for a little bit. Do you have a drain in there just in case of disaster to keep that from filling with water?
Good question. So first of all, the pond does drain out to the Indian River, but in the event of a flood, there is a dirt gap around the pier itself, and water can drain out through there, and it has in the past.
Okay.
Also, I've made sure that there's nothing actually on the floor. Everything's elevated by a couple of feet, so I could get a couple of feet of water in there, worst case scenario, and nothing would be damaged. So, yeah, that is something to think about for sure. The pond's actually lower than it looks, so there's a little bit more elevation there than you think. But yeah, it's definitely a concern.
If that were mine, with my luck, I could see that being my cistern instead of my observatory.
One of my friends calls it the alligator swimming
Curious.
pool. But yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Very cool. I think a lot of us here, like when we grow up, we want to have an observatory in our backyard. That's like the ultimate the ultimate cool thing. So very neat. It also anchors you down so you're not likely to go anywhere. Why would you want to move? You've already built this observatory here. So cool.
That's right. Yeah, it does
Yeah.
affect your resale prospects, I think. But you know,
Yeah.
the price we pay for flying your geek flag.
That's true. That's true. All right. Well, that does wrap up our May meeting. I want to thank everybody who spoke tonight, Derek and Frank and Eric and Bill and me, and I hope I didn't forget anybody. If I did, everybody, all the board members too, of course, who helped put this together. Lots of work goes on behind the scenes to get this, other than the people you see up here talking every week. Trisha, of course, it organizes our programs and finds speakers and things for us, and Sharifa does all sorts of promotions for us, and lots of people doing lots of work. And I shouldn't name people, because what happens is I forget somebody, and if I forgot you, I'm very, very sorry. But yeah, all the board members is blathering now, and it's Wednesday night, and probably all of you have better things to do now, but I hope you had a great time, and I hope to see you again next month in Zoom land, and hopefully in the near future in a parking lot somewhere with a telescope, and or eventually back at the planetarium again. I think it's really, really cool to have an astronomy club that meets at the planetarium. Pretty lucky, and I'm looking forward to getting back to that. Plus seeing lots of you in person again, so we can hang around afterwards and chat. So with that, I'm going to click a button or two and say goodnight. And I think Derek actually is the main button. When he clicks it, we're all gone. I'm just going to go on now. Mwah, he says. All right, stop my video.